It's interesting for me to be here this morning because I don't ordinarily think of myself as an environmental educator. I'm Peter Sawtell. I'm an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. And 15 years ago, I started Eco-Justice Ministries to work with churches to help build an awareness and a commitment to working jointly on ecological sustainability and social justice. This morning, I'd like to share two stories that talk about why building that awareness, doing environmental education in the broadest sense, is important in the religious realm. The first story is very short and comes from 15 years ago when I was first starting the agency. I was talking with a young woman and explained a little bit about what we hope to be doing, and her eyes lit up and she got excited and she said, "I'm so glad to hear that because I've always been very active in my church and I've always cared deeply about the environment. But I never heard my church talk about the environment, so I thought I was wrong." That's tragically the case in far too many churches still. The environment, the natural world, is simply seen as something that isn't worthy of talking about, that isn't a matter of moral concern. We need to break that silence. The second story is considerably longer. It involved about 8 years of my work with various structures of the National United Church of Christ, the denomination that I have my standing in. The UCC has a marvelous reputation in one part of the environmental movement. In 1987, the UCC put out the report Toxic Waste and Race. Some of you may have heard of that defined the term environmental racism and launched the environmental justice movement in many ways. The UCC did a tremendous statistical analysis looking at where toxic waste dumps are located and tied that to census figures and found out that those dumps are primarily located in communities of color. That's the driving factor, not income or education levels or any other demographics. The UCC has done marvelous work through the years fighting environmental injustice, working against concentrated hog farms in North Carolina and urban air pollution. It's a great part of the denomination's reputation. But the UCC has missed the boat on what we ordinarily think of as the environmental issues lifted up by the Sierra Club or so. Those things simply haven't gained traction in the denomination for a long time. And so part of my work was to work with the denomination and try and figure out what was going on. Why is there this divide? Why was there a fight between those two aspects of the church? And I went to innumerable meetings and conference calls and task force sessions. And we spent years trying to figure out why we simply couldn't get these two groups talking together. And I felt like I had one foot in each camp. And finally, after years of conversation, it backed down, and we figured out we couldn't talk to each other, we couldn't work collaboratively because we had two radically different definitions of the environment. We found out, that came to a head in one task force meeting where one of the environmental justice advocates finally blew up and she said, "I don't care if I never see another tree in my life, just so long as my son doesn't have asthma." We all sort of stopped, and we wondered how that was going to work out. And we started to process that. We discovered that the environmental justice movement has generally worked from a definition of the environment, which, as they say, is where we live and work, play and pray. Local communities, very close at home. It's not the environment off in the pretty mountains or the national parks, but close at home and localized issues. And that definition of the environment has often looked at the environment as a place, a thing that can get polluted and dirty. And when it gets dirty, it can hurt people. And that was the understanding they were working from. The ecological environmentalists looked at the environment as the web of life that nurtures and sustains us. And we looked at those forests and those parks as part of the systems that allow life to flourish. Totally different definitions. The web of life and a place that can be dangerous and threatening. No wonder we couldn't talk to each other. No wonder our strategies and our goals were so different. And so we started to come to an understanding of eco-justice, combining ecological systems and social justice that allowed us to start talking together. And when we got that sense of the environment, the denomination could change its program. It held on to the racial justice work, but it also expanded into many new areas. 2 years ago, they had a tree planting program across the nation, something that would have been impossible under the old model. And the UCC was the first denomination to vote on divesting from fossil fuels as a strategy for addressing climate change. Coming to an understanding of what we mean by the environment allowed us to then work into the programs that expose people on both sides of the divide to fresh understandings and new motivations. My vision for environmental education bridges both of those stories. Environmental education has to help us end the silence. It has to help us start talking about the world in which we live and the ways in which we are connected to that whole realm of life and systems. And environmental education has to help us find definitions of the environment that encompass the whole breadth of how we experience the natural world, both as toxic and dangerous places threatening social justice and community life, and as systems of life-giving vitality that nurture us and sustain us. If we can do that sort of environmental education, in my case working with churches, then we can have the possibility of opening up new understandings and new dimensions.